I was 7 years old the first time I heard him scream. It scared me then. It scares me now. That line is from the 1972 film, The Legend of Boggy Creek. Let's get into it, shall we? The Legend of Boggy Creek scared the living hell out of me in 1972. It scared the hell out of all my friends and some of my family members. It is probably the ultimate Bigfoot movie. Even though it's old and kind of dated by today's standards, it still packs a little bit of a realistic wallop that some of these modern Sasquatch movies just don't seem to get. The film was produced by Charles B. Pierce. He was one of the first indie filmmakers out there. You can thank Pierce for being responsible for modern day classics like the Blair Witch Project and all these docudrama type horror films. Without Boggy Creek, we may not have those. Pierce was known for his B movies and working on a tight budget. And after hearing reports of a creature stalking the Fouke, Arkansas area, he decided he wanted to make a film about this. Well, so where's the money going to come from? So Pierce goes out and borrows roughly 160 grand from a local trucking company. He grabs him 8 or 9 high school students and a used camera and trucks it on down to Fouke and begins production on this film. Using local talent, using the bare minimum. And then he couldn't get any interest out of Hollywood. So what he did in order for people to see this film is Pierce rented his own theater, an old theater actually. He cleaned it up and began to show the film. Well, next thing you know, he's got lines wrapped around the block to see this thing. I mean, so Howell Productions, which was based out of South Carolina, they later became Howell International. They picked up The Legend of Boggy Creek. And this thing got distributed nationally, and it made $20 million at the box office. Talk about a return on your investment. It was playing everywhere. Drive-ins, movie theaters, held over for weeks at a time. People all across the country were scared to go in the woods. You think Jaws did it for the beach? Well, Legend of Boggy Creek did it for going into the woods for a while there. Hell, I was scared to go in my backyard. Pierce has really put together a very interesting Bigfoot story here. It has its own appeal to it. The way Pierce has an eye for rural settings, the way he films these swamps, the way he films the sunsets and the wildlife, the sounds, the sound work. Actually the creature itself, which you never really get a good look at. The creature is very effective for a film of this time. No CGI back then, folks. I mean, this film was made with a gorilla suit and some pieces of old wigs. You know, you never see this thing very, very close. You see it in the distance. You see a shadow. You see just enough of it where it'll scare the pants off of you, but not enough to go, oh, well, that's fake. And it works. Whatever Pierce tapped into when he was making this film, it worked from start to finish. In the film, he recreates several of the major encounters with this monster. These encounters have been happening in the Fouke area from way back in the 40s, and they still actually continue to this day. So the Legend of Boggy Creek pretty much has left its legacy, so to speak. It's probably one of the most reported cryptid creatures in the world, as far as the number of times people have actually said they encountered it. The film itself, it does have some issues. It has a couple of musical interludes that are a little dated. You know, when it almost takes you out of the film to me, and it kind of gives it a Walt Disney kind of nature film vibe at first, because they're trying to attribute human qualities to the creature and make you feel sorry for it. It's alone. You know, that's a little dated. And you know, some scenes do meander on a little bit, but it's forgivable to me, because when they get past these few little stumbling points and they get back to the business of the creature and the locals, this film just works. I don't know what it is. It's you know, some people will say, oh, the acting is terrible. Well, you know, these are not professional actors. Pierce didn't have the money to hire professional actors, okay? He used locals. He used actual witnesses who had seen the creature. He used his own family members. You know, Pierce was a go-getter when it came to making something with very little or nothing. And his gamble paid off with this film. It really did. At the box office, this thing was solid gold. Several major encounters are covered in the film. Many of the encounters occur in the woods with hunters stumbling across this creature. Lots of the encounters were experienced by the Crabtree family of Fouke. More than one family member has run into this creature over the years, and the Crabtree name is forever associated with this creature. The final act of the film depicts the incident at the Ford house, where two couples and their children who were staying in the house briefly were stalked every night by this thing that was apparently roaming the property, creeping around their front porch, trying to get into the house. This resulted in several calls to the police. They thought that maybe it was a panther that was hanging around the house. But whatever this thing was, it would not leave them alone, and it was intent on getting inside. We get a little bit of humor in this segment because one of the younger fellows, Bobby Ford, actually is sitting on the toilet, and the creature tries to get into the bathroom window, which is actually a classic scene from this film, and you probably remember it if you saw it when you were younger. And Bobby Ford ultimately is attacked by the creature and has to go to the hospital. What actually happens in the film and what actually happened in reality are similar, although not exactly the same. But the story of the Fouke monster is, you know, not one to be really dismissed. And The Legend of Boggy Creek is not a film to be dismissed either. I think it's been unfairly treated by being on programs like Mystery Science Theater and people making fun of it. Yes, it's an older movie. Yes, it's a little dated in a couple of spots, but it does what it sets out to do. Charles B. Pierce wanted to make a Bigfoot movie that would scare the crap out of you. And in 1972, he did that. And we've been so desensitized today by horror movies and CGI and blood and guts. This was a G-rated film. It had very little real violence in it. You know, it was rated G. I mean, but it still has scared the crap out of you. You know, we're talking about a movie where somebody goes, well, what kind of thing can carry off 200-pound hogs? That's not the love there, man. Anyway, The Legend of Boggy Creek was restored beautifully by Pierce's own daughter, Pamela, in 2019. She finally acquired the rights to the film, and she had to go through the long struggle to have all the bootleg copies removed from streaming venues and from online stores, and she invested a lot of time and money, and they have restored the film beautifully. And if you're a fan of the film, I suggest getting it on Blu-ray because it looks better than it has looked since 1972. So I enjoyed revisiting The Legend of Boggy Creek. I'm going to give it 2 3/4 stars, and I recommend that you check it out. It is probably the most iconic Bigfoot film that I can think of. As a side note, Charles B. Pierce passed away in 2010 at the age of 71. Luckily, his daughter has brought Boggy Creek back to us and restored it to its original glory. And I'm sure her father would be very, very proud to see what she's done with it. So, check it out, man. Until then, catch you later, and subscribe, baby, subscribe.